Welcome to another episode of Single and Strong, the podcast that dives deep into the unique experiences of South Asian single parents raising their children in the face of cultural expectations, societal pressures, and personal challenges. I'm your host, Annabelle Ariyanayagam, and today we have an incredible guest. Our guest today is Somia, and she is the editor of the DESIblitz, a leading magazine that amplifies the stories of South Asian communities in the UK. Somia was raised by a single South Asian mother in the UK, and her story is one of strength, love, and breaking through cultural barriers. Somia, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a lovely to be here, Annabelle.
I'm thrilled to have you here today. But let's start from the beginning. Can you share a little bit about your childhood and what your childhood was like when your parents were still together?
So my mom's always been the primary figure that I can remember in my childhood. I don't know if this was because of the time, but my father took on quite a side role, if that makes sense. Mom was the primary caregiver, the forefront of our education, our day-to-day lives. She's what I remember the most. He was there, but on the periphery. Normal childhood, plenty of getting told off when I did something naughty, but trying to behave. The manicness of primary school, secondary school. And honestly, my mom always at the forefront of my memories.
Mm-hmm. And how old were you when your mum and dad split?
Right. So I was around 11, almost 12. So I just entered secondary school, and the first half of secondary school is when my parents separated. I did have to check this because it's been a considerable amount of time. But yeah, just as I was in I think midway through year 9 potentially.
Mm-hmm. And how did your family dynamic and your experiences in your childhood change when that split happened? I mean, did it change that much if you say you were always quite very close to your mum?
Truthfully, no. As a child, I wasn't aware of how much work my mom put in to my life, to my siblings' life, making sure we were always secure, that we were in truth oblivious to the challenges she was facing. So once they separated, I do remember my mom made it a point to make sure we felt safe, that we knew that if we wanted our father in our lives, he could still be there. She was very supportive, encouraging, and honestly, I don't remember feeling that it was a massive fracture in my life. I
Mm-hmm.
still felt secure. So it didn't,
Okay.
I know for some people, and this is again one of the things, when parents split, for some children, I have friends where it's highly disruptive. It massively fractures and destabilizes their reality. But for me, no.
And was that always the case, or was there a point where you started to register that, yeah, your family was different to maybe other kids at school?
Not during school. For me, I think it was more community perceptions or attitudes, are you poor thing, or hopefully they'll get back together, things like that. Not within the school framework, but outside, community-wise, and general comments I might hear whispered when I was at a certain space, or I'd hear, someone say to my mom, this presumption that when we were younger, she needs a spouse to help raise children. And then when we were older, she needs someone because she'll be alone.
Right. Okay. And were these perceptions and assumptions more significant or more existing within South Asian culture and communities, or just society as a whole?
They do exist in society as a whole, but I would say there's a heavy idealization of marriage within the South Asian community. And this assumption that if you're alone, you're lonely. There's not a recognition, and I think this is society-wide. And I've learned this from my mom. you can be in a relationship, you can be surrounded by people and still be lonely. Just because you're not in a relationship, you're not in a marriage, for whatever reason, whether you were and then it's broken down and there's been a divorce or separation, doesn't mean then you're lonely. And within the South Asian community in particular, where it comes for women, this idea that marriage is this essential, vital thing that must occur, without which you're not fulfilled, is really problematic. And I do think to a degree it's still there today, very much so.
Still there today. What are the things do you think in the South Asian culture that really drive that? Is there a certain almost idea or principle or practice that encourages this idea of a woman has to be in a marriage and with a partner to be happy and successful, and that is success for women in South Asian cultures?
Honestly, I think it's an ideal that's been clung to, potentially because it's one of many ideals I think that has been clung to within our communities, potentially because, you know, for example, my grandparents migrated here, a new world, challenging, facing discrimination, racism. They were wanted for the labor, but not really wanted in spaces. So they clung to cultural traditions and ideals and values much more deeply than potentially if they had remained in, say, Pakistan. And I think marriage generally is very romanticized and idealized. Even, Hollywood movies and so forth, romance is highly idealized. Marriage, because in South Asian communities, the family is still quite essential. I mean, it's beautiful. I love the fact that we value family so much, the networks, and even if we know at least 40 plus of our cousins, right? I mean, sometimes, yes, we struggle with names, but at least we have these dynamics and relationships that create magic. And it's beautiful in that regard. But there's still this problem of romanticizing marriage and what it means when it comes to family relationships. And this idea that a father and mother have to be together for a successful family, when that can be poisonous in itself. So I have, through my lived experiences, both as someone from a single parent household and when my parents were together, but also looking at others that I have seen, sometimes having two parents staying in a marriage, and sometimes they do say, because I remember my mom hearing people saying it to my mom, what about the kids? For their sake, try, kind of thing. Having two parents in a household can be more poisonous, more toxic for children than parents splitting. That can be better for everyone's well-being. But that side of the reality is rarely acknowledged, and it creates discomfort because it breaks the ideology and, that image of what marriage is and what it means and what,
Sure.
having two parents in a household means.
Mm-hmm. And we've spoken a bit about success and what success means in South Asian culture. What to you, as a daughter of a single parent family, what to you is success for women, for South Asian people, or for yourself? How would you define success?
I think it's different for everyone. It's being happy and confident in where you are. I do think things have changed. There's more encouragement for women to pursue education and careers in a way that didn't exist when, for example, my mom was younger. She was always very passionate about encouraging us to pursue our education. So, for example, when I wanted to study, rather than saying why or stop, she was like, sure, go ahead. When I didn't have confidence in myself, that I wouldn't get into a certain university or I wouldn't get a certain job, she was the one saying afterwards, I told you it'd happen. I think success means different things to different people. For me, it's being happy and content with the choices I've made and being comfortable with where I am and how I have gotten here and having my family around me. the problem is that ideologically, and this trickles down through the generations, it may not be something that's embraced in the same way by second or third generation South Asians from whatever background they are, but it's an ideology that puts pressure on us, whether it intends to or not, that marriage has to be a part of your reality if you're a woman.
Mm-hmm.
A successful marriage, at least to the world, no matter how much is crumbling on the inside. That, you know, that is something that has to be part of your reality, that you have to suck it up and put a smile on for the world, when that shouldn't be the case.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to your time growing up. And I mean, your mother sounds like she was such an incredible woman, and I'm sure her strength really helped shape you and grow you as an individual. But as you were growing up in the UK, did you ever feel torn between the expectations of your South Asian culture and the broader, more Western culture around you that exists in the UK?
Yes, so I identify as British, Pakistani, Muslim. You know, we have multiple identities. There's no one, but yeah, but I am third generation, because my grandparents came here, and I have to say yes, 100%. I think there's a gender dynamic to it, in that within the wider community, family, this idea of izzat and family honor, and girls being more at risk of intentionally or unintentionally breaking it. But
Could you
I
just,
mean,
for any maybe listeners who might not know what those terms are, maybe just explain what they are as well?
yeah, so izzat means honor. It can also mean respect. So we give izzat to our elders and family members, which is a beautiful part of izzat. But izzat can also be about a way of policing and restraining individuals, and often women. It's the idea of family honor, community honor is often used to police women. But it can also be beautiful, you know, the izzat that we give our elders and how we engage with each other and others. But so that wasn't to a degree an issue. There was sometimes, you know, different dynamics. My mom grew up in a different time to me, so even though she was very open, sometimes there were, she's probably gonna go, why did you say this? But you know, things with clothes sometimes when I was, or me wanting to go out but her not feeling comfortable because something could happen. I mean, for example, I love traveling. I adore traveling. But I had to spend years conditioning my mom to get ready for that as a teenager. And then my first trip, I made sure the hotel was in an area where there was a lot of embassies and security. I had to get information on crime stats and things and give it to my mom. Kind of, you know?
Yeah. No, my mum is exactly the same. Whenever I go on holiday, she has to have my flight details, the hostel I'm in, or the hotel, a contact emergency, my health insurance
Yeah,
contact person.
yeah. It's all printed out and I'm still doing it now. So, you know.
No, yeah, I mean, I think lots of people will find that very, very relatable.
Yeah, I mean, some of my friends do go to me why, but it gives her a sense of security, even though she couldn't exactly teleport if something happened. But now growing up, there were moments where it was tension between behaving like a South Asian Pakistani and what some people would say not too white, but what is that? I am British South Asian. This is the world I live in. But sometimes there was a tug of war, especially with generational expectations. And then what I was like, but this is my life. As long as I'm not doing something wrong, you know I'm not. It doesn't matter what other people think. But as a teenager, especially, you don't realize some of the pressure and tension parents can face. Which now I'm looking back like, okay, but I'm also glad I did question and challenge, even if I did have my bratty moments.
No, I think that's so important to register. Like, people are made up of layers, and when you're mixed race and come from different cultures, all of those different cultures have different expectations and cultures, and when it all comes together, it can be that have that pressure and that intensity. Do you feel that has eased as you've grown older, or learned more about yourself, or understood more about your different layers?
I'll become more confident in the fact that for me, I'm considerate of how my actions or will impact my mom or what she'll think. But when it comes to wider societal expectations or judgments, and I was also brought up in a bubble. I mean, this is also my mom's fault in how I am, in that she brought me up in a bubble where she protected me from wider societal judgments, expectations, stereotypes. She was always the buffer to that. People knew they couldn't usually say anything to me or my siblings because my mom was there to, do not mess with my kids, do not put these ideas into their heads. They are going to thrive and live. But when I was younger, I think I was more nervous and hesitant, especially as a teenager, that if I did something, how it would impact my mom and how she'd be judged. Now, and I suppose my mid-20s onwards, I came to the realization that people, if they want to, will always judge. They will always make assumptions. As long as I know that I'm not doing anything wrong, I'm going to live my life. And it's one of the reasons that I have an interesting dynamic with my mom, at least according to some of my friends, in that I'm very honest with her. So growing up and even now, and this may seem strange. So there are stereotypes around in certain spaces, what's appropriate behavior for South Asian women, where you go and whatnot. For some, that means concealing things from your parents. But because, again, I think part of it was my mom was a single parent. And I never wanted someone to go, we saw Somia here. What was she doing here? My mom being confused. So growing up, and even now, if I'm going somewhere, I would tell her where I am. Just so that if someone sees me in a space that they think is problematic, she can go, yeah, I know she's there. And, so what? I know she's there.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting that you talk about your mum as like not only your caregiver, but also your protector, and also someone you confide in, and she fits all of these different roles. And I think that's something that lots of people don't necessarily see or understand, that a lot of kind of people from family units will see mum as the caregiver, dad as the protector. What misconceptions alongside that do you think people in society in the South Asian community have about single parent families that aren't necessarily true?
So I think this is one of the things that frustrated me when I was growing up as well, especially when I looked at the media and politicians talking about broken homes. That used to make my blood boil so much. This idea that if you're in a single parent home, you're from a broken home. That is not the case. For some, it may feel like that, but it's a brush that is used to stereotype so many. You can have two parents in a house with the kids, and that can be a broken home, one that causes severe damage. There's magic in single parent families. And it can bring safety and security and opportunities, remove tension that is just not acknowledged. So I think growing up, one of the things that frustrated me, both within the South Asian community more broadly, especially when it came to political media narratives, was this idea of single parents equals broken homes. It used to make my blood boil so badly.
Yeah, because the term broken home is so suggestive that something needs to be fixed. But a lot of the time, single parent families are better off, as you say, than they would be if there was arguments happening all the time, there was conflict and chaos. You're absolutely right.
And also the thing is, sometimes you can have both parents in the house, but it's still a single parent house. Like from the outside, it looks like perfect, right? That ideal nuclear family kind of thing. But it could still be a single parent house where the mom's doing everything. The dad's just there as a figure, so society and the family can say, nah, it's a normal family.
Right. Yeah. No, it's super interesting. Well, coming to the present, you're now the editor of the DESIblitz and amplifying so many South Asian voices in the community. How did your upbringing influence your decision to work in media and eventually become the editor of this amazing publication?
Right, so I'm one of the editors, so I'm a part of an amazing editorial team um, at DESIblitz. So it's a awesome place to work. So I would like to say I'm not the editor, but one of the editors.
Well, now you're one of the editors for the DESIblitz, been playing a massive role in amplifying the voices of South Asian people in the community. How did your upbringing influence your decision to work in the media industry and eventually become a South Asian focused editor for this publication?
So my journey to DESIblitz has zigzagged. It wasn't direct influence of my how I was raised and the dynamics. But one of the good things is, and I think this is again where my mom deviated from the norm of what was expected, and what she should say, especially since I'm female, that she's obviously encouraged me to explore. So I'm finishing my thesis right now for my PhD, and I've done multiple jobs in different sectors, and I came to DESIblitz a few years ago as a writer. This is me unintentionally plugging, but intentionally as well. They have an amazing program to ODP program, and you can gain experience as a writer. So a few years ago, I came onto DESIblitz to gain skills in writing within the media and more generally. I mean, I have a very academic background, so my writing style was quite formal and could make even me weep. Going to DESIblitz, starting to write for a online magazine, it helped. It helped profoundly. So if I compare some of my earlier work to, for example, now, the difference is drastic. So drastic. Um, but so I'm finishing my studies, and I was working at a non-profit, and I needed a little change while I study. And I gained the great opportunity to work at DESIblitz. But I mean, when I first went to DESIblitz as a writer to develop experience, some of my first articles were around single parenthood and being a single parent child. Because as I grew, I kept hearing and meeting people from single parent households within the South Asian community who were telling stories that differed so drastically from the mainstream ideology of, broken home, the poor kids. Often it's a single parent mother, can be a father, but this idea of pitting them, they must be struggling. When will they get married again? Will they get back together for the kids? That kind of thing. So I remember when I first started at DESIblitz, and they encouraged us to talk about the topics and explore the issues that were uncomfortable or were pushed to the shadows. And it enabled me to delve more into the realities of single parenthood. Yes, there can be challenges. I mean, the older I got, the more I became aware of what my mom had concealed so amazingly, that I never knew she was, financial struggles as a child, as a teenager. I was absolutely oblivious. She was brilliant at, budgeting and hiding any stress she felt. I never saw it. It was only when I was late teens, early 20s that, because I started working, because I started being more conscious and aware of money and how the world worked, I realized, oh boy, I grew up so very oblivious to the challenges she faced on that scale. And so one of the things DESIblitz showed me, and it helped me, well, one of the things with DESIblitz is when I first started as a writer there, it helped me reflect more on the challenges within the South Asian community and look back at my life, making myself sound like 500, but look back on my life and see it from different perspectives and angles.
Mm-hmm.
And it raised more questions.
Yeah, such as what kind of questions did it raise?
So why is there this continuing pitting also single parent families? I mean, and it's not intentional, and it's sometimes people aren't aware they're doing it. When I was in undergrad, I have always been, when people ask me about my family dynamics, so they just say, do you live with your parents or mom, or, especially when I was in undergrad, I would just say just my mom and my siblings. And I remember in undergrad, there was a friend, and she was brought up in a very South Asian bubble of, mom, dad, nuclear family kind of idealized in the house. I mean, we're slightly different in that within the South Asian communities generally, there's still extended family in the way there isn't in, say, white British communities. But the nuclear family has become idealized, mom, dad, kids, home. And she very innocently went to me, "Oh, you poor thing," but with a lot of pity in her voice. And it made me pause and just double blink at her because I didn't know what to say because I didn't understand where that was coming from. And then I just kind of shoved that incident to the side. And then when I started writing at DESIblitz, and I started to speak to more single parents and single parent children, and hearing their experiences and how some of it resonated, it made me aware there's this entrenched idea that really needs to be unraveled and dismantled. And one of the things I like about DESIblitz is we can do that about multiple issues and realities.
Mm-hmm. No, it's amazing, and you're doing great work. How does your mum feel about that you're sharing the voices of other single parents, children of single parents, and really spreading kind of her story, but through other people's voices?
I do remember us having conversations where I went to her. I did not realize as a child, and I'm sure it's the same for my siblings, we didn't realize how much she was having to do. And one side, she was protecting us from community, wider family, potentially, comments and things, and judgments, because we were definitely in a protective bubble, so oblivious. I mean, I had fleeting comments, and there might be, one or two older relatives who said, you should encourage your parents to get back together and things like that. But, we never heard anything else. But then I remember when I wrote those articles, talking to her, and just the way in which, as I said before, she protected us from recognizing a lot. I didn't realize the challenges she must have faced emotionally, financially, in making sure we were secure, because we never went out without. There was always food on the table, birthday presents, Eid, all that happened. I mean, when I was in primary school, especially when I went on school trips, I was the one my friends knew would have the best snacks because mom would put like mate and stuff in my lunchbox. So, we never lacked, but I didn't realize until I was older that meant her being very strategic, budgeting, she's very savvy with sales. I mean, and I've talked to him recently, and she would say when there were sales on, or she'd be very conscious and try and buy things in advance for birthdays and things, so that we never felt like we were missing out.
Yeah. No, well, she sounds like an amazing woman. You obviously have a great relationship with your mum, and it was very positive and supportive. I think for a lot of people, especially daughters and mums, can often have a lot of intensity in the relationship. There's so much love and so much care there. But it's almost like there's one parent and daughter, and it's so intense that it can also be the opposite end of the spectrum, and there can be conflict and chaos, and disconnect. What advice would you give to a daughter or a mum out there who is a single parent family, and it's just they're not meshing, they're having a hard time, and the intensity of that relationship is just a lot to handle?
Right. So we definitely had our moments. It never got really bad, but we definitely had moments. She'll probably say I had a few years where I was a absolute brat for her, especially as a teenager. I disagree and say I had a year where I was a brat, but after that, some of the tension was because I don't know if it was growing pains and conflict between her expectations and how, because my mom has been very open and encouraging, but there was also, to a degree, consciousness and self-awareness of wider community and how they may judge. Whereas for me, and again, this is her fault, the protective bubble she brought me up in, for me, I don't care if they judge as long as I know she knows that I'm not doing anything that's problematic, as long as she's comfortable. So for those who, I would say, try being honest, but it can be painful, because even when I was a teenager, there were moments where I would say something honestly to my mom, and it caused some tension, or vice versa. But if you're not honest, no matter how painful it is, even when you're choking up and you don't want to say it and it's making you feel sick, being honest is important, because even if it stings at the time, you'll be better for it in the long run. And saying sorry when you know you're in the wrong, I hate doing it, but say sorry when you're in the wrong, whether you're the parent or the child. No one likes saying it. I can say that from experience, but it matters. But definitely honesty, especially depending on how you're framed within the community and your extended family. I think whether you're this, whatever single parent dynamic it is, whether it's with your mom or dad, honesty matters, especially during the time I was growing up. So I think early 2000s when my parents split, and then my teenage years. If I hadn't been honest with my mom, if I had gone to places and not told her, or she hadn't been aware of things I was doing, it could have caused wider issues, which again, to a degree, policed my behavior a little bit when I was younger. But it also meant that she could always be confident in knowing that I would go to her. So even if I messed up, I'd cringe, but I'd acknowledge it.
No, I think that's good advice. Honesty is always the best policy, as they say.
Yeah, sadly, not always easy, and it can be very painful, but...
Yeah, especially when you're in those teen years growing up. I think that's probably, arguably one of the hardest times to be completely honest with parents.
Yeah. And parents do need to realize that they kind of need to take a step back as well, because no matter how much they try, sometimes what they grew up with, the pressures they faced from, and, what the community will say, that kind of thing might influence how they try and speak to, or what they think of what their child's doing, especially if you're part of the South Asian community and embedded. So I think it's not just the child. Parents sometimes do need to take a step back.
Yeah, no, that's fair. What do you think the wider community, both South Asian and beyond, can learn from the experiences of South Asian single mothers?
I think there needs to be, and I think it's changed. We definitely, South Asian single parents seem more visible now in some ways within the community and the everyday. Maybe not so much in the media and, say, film and TV, but they're definitely more visible in the everyday. I think there needs to be recognition that single parents, especially, and I'm gonna have to say single mothers because I'll come from a single, single parent household with a mother, that they are. I'm using this word too much, but they are magic. They're rock stars in a single parents are rock stars in a way. I honestly, I can't really explain what they do, how they do it. It can enable you to have a self-awareness I don't think I would have if I came from a household with two parents, which possibly would have been highly problematic and would have had meant that we may not be where we are now, not the secure, confident people we are. Not the case for everyone, but I do think there needs to be greater recognition of the fact that not greater comfortable recognition, but I think it's still discomfort in this reality that women can do it alone, that they don't need someone. That needs to be recognized more, even within families where there's mom and dad. Women aren't just the caregivers, they are also the protectors. They're often helping, and this is going on traditional gender lines where there's this assumption dad is the provider, protector, mom is the carer. I don't think that's ever entirely been the reality, but it's an ideology that hides how amazing and the significant role women have always played. I don't know, maybe that even within the South Asian community, there are differences. So we've talked about the South Asian community, quite umbrella category, right? But there's differences slightly in some of the pressures that might exist within, say, Pakistani Indian. I don't know if that's something. I'm just thinking about. I wouldn't say Muslim because I know Indian Muslims from single parents is more the way so like Indian Gujarati to Indian Sikh to Pakistani, and how certain ideologies are entrenched and so forth. Also, like, I mean, with Asian Single Parent Network, it's brilliant that the network exists and it gives a space, but also the need to recognize different groups within a South Asian community might feel comfortable in different spaces and when they get support and things. And the challenges, for example, even if Asian Single Parents Network had existed when I was a child, I don't know if my mom would have gone to it because she's brought up to think you do it all yourself.
What challenges did you see or witness your mum experiencing as a South Asian single mum?
I think one of them was that the pressure that she may not have, she dismissed, but this pressure or expectation that she should return to a marriage for the sake of the children. This assumption that we were missing out but we won't. And I think that can keep people in marriages when they shouldn't be. This idea, you stay for the sake of the children, which can be very problematic.
Yeah. And within the South Asian category, there are lots of smaller communities and countries within that. What different views do different groups and communities have of single parent families?
So I can't speak for every group. I can just speak from my experience. I would say there's a general idealization of marriage across communities that can lead to stereotyping of single parent households as a loss or something missing. I think in lived experience, different people from the different South Asian groups, say such as Pakistani or Indian or Pakistani Muslim or there can be nuances in how they experience it and complexities that can be recognized. And one of the great things is you have spaces like Asian Single Parents Network that now allow people to share experiences and recognize they're not alone. But I also think there's a challenge in that certain generations, especially our single parents from the South Asian community, think they should be able to do it all alone, deal with all the challenges alone. This may be changing, but I'm also thinking about people I know from my generation who still, again, feel rather than seeking help, because that's not what you do, you deal with it alone. And the need for recognition of cultural nuances and how that impacts different groups and within the South Asian community, and what that means for the support they need needs to be recognized, or how you reach them so they know it's okay to gain support. I saw a lot of it through the lens of, say, the Pakistani South Asian community growing up. So that's where I'm generally seeing it from.
Well, thank you so much, Somia, for sharing your story and your journey. I think lots of people will find it comforting and relatable. That's it for today's episode of Single and Strong. A huge thank you to Somia for sharing your journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. And don't forget to share it with anyone who might benefit from these stories. Until next time, goodbye.